Hello, Mr. Putin. Today I'm going to try and persuade you to stop bombing innocent people in Ukraine, especially the maternity wards and children's hospitals. And I'm going to show that it actually works in your interest to stop doing this. And I'm going to explain why using philosophy. So, in ethics, there is this debate about morality, and there's basically two paradigms. There's the one paradigm where we talk about moral and immoral people. That's a bit misguiding. I know in cultural terms we speak of moral and immoral people. Hitler was immoral, Gandhi and Nelson Mandela were moral people. But in the eyes of the universe, we have all done moral and immoral things. So that paradigm is something that we attribute morality to actions. This was a good thing to do or this was a bad thing to do. Anyway, so that's one side. But on the other side, we have what are called amoral people. Now, amoral people are the sort of people who actually lack all sense of moral judgment, moral feeling, and sensitivity. And it's the type of agent that we associate with animals in the animal kingdom. We don't blame, for example, a lion for fighting other lions for territory or for killing the antelope or deer for food. It's just what lions do. We don't say that they are moral or immoral creatures. They are amoral. They just don't have that sense of morality. And so in ethics, there's this big debate about whether amoral people, human beings, actually exist. And the reason why there's a debate about it is because we think that morality is actually something that's intrinsic to human beings. If you are a human being, then you are a moral person. And part of that morality includes, for Kant, for example, recognizing the sacredness of humanity and human life and the will of people to express themselves. Excuse me. And we think that that's just something that other creatures don't have. It's something that sets us apart in all of existence. However, in history, we come across these counterexamples. We look at some people and think these have to be some amoral people because they were so bad, they just clearly did not know how bad they were. Now, the first example that comes to mind is Hitler and what he did to the Jews. I actually think that there is a better example, and that's actually one of your predecessors, Joseph Stalin. Because you see, for Hitler, I personally get the feeling from Hitler, and I don't think I'll be alone, that there was something about his definition of human life that he preserved. He just didn't count the Jews as human. Now, that was obviously a huge catastrophic moral error. But when it came to, for example, the invasion of Paris or just the way he conducted his war, it was a military versus military affair. He didn't bring in non-combatants. Obviously, there was the Blitz in London, but there's something to show that he was sensitive about taking other people's lives unnecessarily, especially when it came to combat. And obviously, he killed a few of his own people to get to power. That's just what people did to get power. That's why power is just such a corrupting thing, like Ernst Röhm and so on. But he didn't, we get the feeling that certainly in Germany and to other Germans, he did not kill people unnecessarily. And when he did, he at least understood the weight of what he was doing. The tragedy with him, obviously, is that when it comes to the Jews, the reason why we think he's amoral is that he just did not count the Jews as human beings. If he classified the Jews as human beings, I think he would have treated them the same. Joseph Stalin, however, he did to his own people what Hitler did to Jews. He killed Russian people in their millions, starving them to death because they did not industrialize, because they did not conform to his view of his ideal of what the communist world should have looked like. And that's to say nothing about killing as a sport when it came to his paranoia of people around him. He basically killed people every week, sometimes without excuse, just to uphold his own sense of security. And so we look at Stalin and we think, this is not about, being Russian or not Russian, or being Jew or not Jew, like Hitler or something. He just didn't seem to have that moral feeling, that sort of moral feeling that attaches value and sacredness to human life. So we count Stalin as amoral. And so the question is, well, is it possible to be a human being and lack that sort of judgment? Was Stalin actually a human being? The reason why this is important to Mr. Putin is because we're getting evidence, increasing evidence, that you might actually be an amoral person. And the main reason for doing this is how you treat people and punish them unnecessarily. Yes, we talk about what you did in Syria and what you did to Chechens, but now in Ukraine, I mean, the bombing of maternity wards and children's hospital, these people have nothing to do with the war. They are so innocent. We know you don't think that they are innocent because they are part of the nation that are fighting back. But you have basically taken this war outside of the paradigm of the military of military affairs. Okay, we all know that your military operation hasn't quite worked out to plan, and so your tactic now, your strategy now, has to inflict terror, and it's terror by death. You are killing people and making them afraid and trying to break down the will of the Ukrainian people, whatever the cost. And this comes back to the amoral person. Think of the lion in the wilderness. For the immoral person, the only right and wrong there is their will, right? And they express their will, and people who don't conform to the will, their will, who don't abide to it, are doing wrong. That's how amoral people behave. All there is a will and nothing else, just like the lion in the wilderness. No right and wrong apart from that. And that's exactly what your problem is with the Ukrainian people. They have fought back, and they're showing that they're not going to stand up for a lot of your things, and so a lot of your oppression, and for your they're not going to stand up to your aggression, and they're going to fight. So what you're actually doing is taking the battleground outside of the military side and putting it psychologically to inflict terror on an entire nation by killing people and civilians simply because you can, almost to punish them for being defiant. Now, Mr. Putin, I'm going to give two reasons why this will work against you and why it is actually in your interest to stop. The first reason, it's the softer reason, it is that if you live in a world where the only people do wrong simply because they go against your will, you cease to be believable. Now, this is important because you are a leader, Mr. Putin. You give speeches, you do TV interviews, and so on. It is part of your role as a leader to motivate people through words, to get them to follow you. However, if you show yourself to be amoral, i.e., not to appreciate people's humanity, and that all you have is power, then it basically means that everything that you say is meaningless. Okay? If you went on television and tried to convince the Russian people, for example, why it is rational for you to engage in this war, they're not going to agree with you because they think your reasons are good. They're going to agree with you because of the power you have over them. Now, that may gratify you, that may gratify your sense of power and authority, but it basically means that your words just don't have value. It is your power, and if you lose that power, you might lose your life. And I think you have put yourself in a position where you cannot afford to lose power. Contrast that to if you think of someone like Winston Churchill. He conformed to the will of other people, the will of his generals, the will of the British people, who voted him out months after he won the greatest war in all of history. And he consented to it and he accepted it. Because he understands that to violate someone else's will with whom he has a social contract with will be something quite fundamental. He has that basic moral feeling. He has these sort of principles so that when he speaks, we can judge him for being immoral in so many things, the Dardanelles or what he did with Gandhi in India and so on. So we'll put him in the moral immoral camp. So he's a person who had moral feeling but just did immoral things and they were big. We still don't think that Churchill is amoral. And because there's this association, there's this affinity between our sense of right and wrong and his sense of right and wrong, we will be reading his work for centuries, for 1,000 years, right? You, however, everything you say will evaporate once you have gone, because all you had to persuade was power. We don't listen to anything that Stalin or Mao said because they had nothing to say. All they did was oppress people because they did not do what they wanted. So, in terms of your leadership and whatever legacy you want to leave for the Russian people, it is gone if you show yourself to be amoral. As I said in the last video, this is no longer about Russian greatness or advocating the Russian people. This is about you. So you lose credibility basically as a leader, maybe even as a moral agent. The second reason, which might strike home for you, Mr. Putin, is that it puts you in danger if you are recognized or seen to be an amoral person. The reason is this: people are willing to die for freedom. They're willing to die, okay, for freedom. If I was in Russia today, it will only be a matter of time before I say that living under your system, your censorship, your oppression will be too much. And I am a human being. Freedom is everything to me. Love and freedom. If I don't have those, life is not worth living, right? And I would rather die than continue living, which means that I will go out into the street knowing that I'll face your forces or whatever and be willing to die because living in this condition is too much, right? Rather than allowing me to freely demonstrate myself and express myself and be free, you have suppressed your own people. Now, Mr. Putin, the Russians today are not the Russians of Stalin's time. They know far more about human rights, about international conventions. They're aware of these things. They're aware of what you're doing in Ukraine, and they no longer feel that they want to be associated with that type of leader whom Russia just seems to have produced generation after generation. And because they're expressing themselves, you are now taking away their own freedom, as we've seen in the demonstrations, right? Not to mention the people around you. Therefore, you have pushed your own people, Mr. Putin, to a point where they're willing to take that risk. They're going to say, along with all the freedom fighters in history, from Churchill against, Hitler to, I'm from Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta against the British Empire, every freedom fighter in history, they would just say, right, it is worth dying. And that puts everyone, Mr. Putin, the people around you, your own people, other countries against you, right? If you show yourself to at least have an affinity, a moral affinity with the innocent people of Ukraine, with innocent people in general, they will not get to that point that quickly, right? So it is in your interest to show that you are not just some big bully, for the Russian general next to you, one day it's bombing, Ukrainian children and pregnant women. The other day, he will say something against you. It'll be his family, and he knows this. He sees this through your actions. So I do not think that you've fully appreciated what a human being is, and that we live for freedom, and that for someone like you to impose your will in the way that you do, that completely bypasses all moral judgment, it will work against you. So I think that is why it is in your interest to show the world, to show the Ukrainian people some restraint, to allow them to defy you. I know that sounds, like hell to your ears, but I think you need to do it for your own sake. Now, obviously, you have committed war crimes and justice will be served. The question is whether history will put you in the camps of the Stalins and the Maos. And I think that you are very far along that road, but there's still some things you can do that can put you into the immoral paradigm. So that we can say, this guy, he did some very immoral things, but he had a sense of moral judgment. So there's something about us that could relate to him than to classify you as an amoral person. Thank you.